Chapter 6. Bob Henderson at Home. Bob Henderson had reached his career goal a couple of decades ago. He had wanted to remove himself from the organizational chart and still collect a salary. He had actually accomplished this feat a few times, having his style temporarily cramped by internal auditors who insisted that his salary and desk space be billed to this or that department. But he always found a way to resituate himself with an out-of-the-way office and his preferred secretary, Stella Brown. Had Bob Henderson not found his career at the FBI so incredibly rewarding, he probably would have become a professional gatecrasher. One of those nondescript guys in a tuxedo who rushes the stage and accepts the award for someone who cannot be in attendance, beating the official stand-in to the microphone. Bob Henderson was politically connected, but not to the degree that everyone thought. He was second-generation FBI, and at one time he had a brother and two first cousins in the ranks. As they all found greener pastures, other relatives would come aboard. Bob Henderson used the perception of nepotism to his advantage. His first brilliant career move was at age 31 when he schmoozed his way onto the dais during a press conference. The question, what was Henderson doing on TV, was answered with, his father was a big shot, his uncle was a big shot, and his brother pulled some strings. Soon, Bob Henderson was standing in the background of every press conference. He would tell his supervisor, "There's someplace I have to be," and the supervisor would then watch him on the nightly news. His second prudent maneuver came when an alert Bob Henderson grabbed an unattended microphone and started the press conference prematurely. "I'm not going to steal the limelight from the brave men and women who did the real work. My role was minimal at best." Even that was an exaggeration. He had no role whatsoever in the investigation. He wasn't even sure what the investigation entailed. But after a few recitals of, "I'm not the best person to answer that question," he praised the highest-ranking official on stage and surrendered the microphone to him. Thereafter, Bob Henderson kicked off most press conferences. He had become the unofficial master of ceremonies. But Bob Henderson was not one to rest on his laurels. His most ambitious ploy was editing and distributing a video called FBI, A Legacy of Dedication and Courage. Lost on the cutting room floor were those press conferences not hosted by Bob Henderson. In scene after scene, the rising star could be spotted introducing yet another hero. Legacy was not copyrighted, and it contained a reminder to copy and distribute freely. Within a month of its release, every agent and employee and former agent and former employee owned a copy. It would soon become included in the Bureau's orientation of new agents and employees. Bob Henderson had become the face of the FBI. Debbie Henderson was an ugly drunk. Some people would think of her as mean. Her two daughters thought of her as cruel, even sadistic. Bob preferred the term ugly. She wasn't unattractive. No, the 2 o'clock elixir seemed to preserve her good looks. She looked at least 10 years younger than her age. But she was an ugly drunk. Debbie's drinking had evolved over the years. When she was younger, the Chardonnay acted like a stimulant. 2 a.m. and she could still hurl insults like it was dinner time. It was always stressful. She tested everyone's stamina. But in recent years, she usually passed out between 7 and 10 p.m. She always zonked out while eating dinner off a TV tray in the living room. Tonight would be another such evening. Because they lived in an old house, it was too costly for the Hendersons to retrofit a room for panorama. But the living room did feature 2 entire perpendicular walls devoted to screen space. It was here that Bob Henderson maintained his vigil. Debbie had a two-wall rap devoted to crime and justice. Bob hated that show and its 5 spin-offs. Crime and Justice spawned Crime and Justice Hate Crimes, Crime and Justice Gun Victims Units, Crime and Justice Gender Crimes, Crime and Justice Green Patrol, and Crime and Justice Animal Protection. It was hard to stroll through the dial without stepping in C&J content. The FBI had officially praised C&J and offered the producers some sort of award, but as much as he passively watched these shows while standing vigil over his wife, Bob Henderson just could not warm up to the formula. Sure, it provided a lot of free propaganda for the criminal justice system, and it had idiot appeal, which was significant because smart people usually didn't serve on juries, but it was so amazingly stupid. Tonight, the Animal Protection Unit was pursuing yet another evil white man. They were building a case against a pharmaceutical executive who had allowed his cancer drugs to be tested on animals in a southern state seemingly out of New York City's jurisdiction. The C&J team was closing the loophole. Bob Henderson looked at his wife out of the corner of his eye. She had left a trail of food on the floor and on the leather couch. She showed signs of fading. Eating had ceased. Her eyes were closing. Her head bobbed. She was in the home stretch. Suddenly, Judy Hunsaker called his private cell, and Bob Henderson sprinted into the hallway. "Special Agent Henderson." "I'm in Texas." "What are you doing in Texas?" "The chemical attack. I'm in uncoordinated video, remember?" "I thought you were going to send me some pics." "What's the use? Someone posted it on UVid. I'll send you the link." "Later." "Okay." Bob Henderson terminated the call and re-entered the living room. "The eagle has landed," he said triumphantly. He gently removed the smoldering cigarette from Debbie's fingers and snuffed it in the ashtray. He grabbed her plate and fork and napkin and glass and carted them to the kitchen. He returned with a warm washcloth and washed her face and hands. As he had done so many times, Bob Henderson carried his wife upstairs and gently tucked her into bed. After using the Dyson on the couch and the carpet, he put the UVid link on the larger screen, dimmed the lights, and cranked the volume. This was a news story, not really Veritas caliber. Local news in Milwaukee. A 20-year-old convicted drug criminal who was facing a long prison sentence had cut his wrist in the county jail. Kind of generic, but wait. Someone had spliced in some crime scene pics. Why didn't they post this to Veritas? Why share it with the undeserving masses? The pics were enjoyable, but not primarily arousing. Not primarily. But then it flashed back to the perp's mugshot. He looked like he was 13. Then they showed his mother. What a knockout. And she held it together for a few seconds while speaking and then suddenly got choked up. Bob looped this part from the time she choked up to the finale of wailing and blubbering. On the third loop, Bob shot his load into the carpet. He used club soda to clean up the discharge.